Beloved, listen to me carefully. There is a command from heaven that many believers are ignoring, and because they ignore it, they are sabotaging their own miracles. God did not say, try to be quiet. God did not say, think about speaking less. God said, Eshit Yahuwah, and he is deadly serious about this. You pray for breakthrough, but your mouth is breaking it. You fast for favor, but your tongue cancels it. You cry for deliverance, but your words imprison you. Do you know why the enemy attacks your mouth before your life? Because your mouth is the steering wheel of your destiny. Some of you survived what should have killed you. Not because you were strong, but because God still had mercy. Yet today, heaven is warning you mercy is not permission. The same mouth that worships God on Sunday, complains on Monday, curses on Tuesday, doubts on Wednesday, and wonders on Thursday why nothing is changing. Listen, hell does not need to fight you when you are speaking against yourself. The Israelites did not die in Egypt. They did not die crossing the Red Sea. They died because of their mouths in the wilderness. God is saying tonight, enough talking, enough explaining, enough announcing your fear, enough repeating the problem. Some battles are not won by shouting. Some doors open only in silence. Some miracles are delayed because God cannot trust your mouth. If God gives you a promise and you give it a negative confession, whose voice do you think heaven honors? Today's word is not soft, it is not polite, it is urgent. Shut your mouth, not because God is angry, but because he is protecting what he is about to release. When you choose, life chooses you back. Life is not moved by wishes, complaints, or intentions. Life responds to decisions. The moment you choose, you activate a law that has existed since creation itself. God did not design life to chase people who hesitate. He designed life to respond to those who decide. When you choose, you step out of neutrality, and neutrality is where dreams die quietly. Heaven does not empower indecision. The earth does not open its doors to hesitation. The spiritual and the natural realms respond to clarity, not confusion. Choice is proof of belief. What you truly believe is revealed not by what you say, but by what you choose when pressure is applied. Many people pray for change but choose comfort. They ask God for elevation but choose familiarity. They desire transformation but choose fear. Life listens to choices, not prayers that are contradicted by actions. When you choose growth over ease, truth over approval, obedience over convenience, life begins to align itself with you. God honors movement more than perfection. He never demanded flawless steps, he demanded faithful ones. The Red Sea did not part when Israel prayed. It parted when they moved forward. The miracle waited for a choice. Every delay in destiny is connected to a postponed decision. Life stands still when you stand still. The moment you choose to step forward, even trembling, life responds by making a way where there was none. Choosing also requires responsibility. Once you choose, you can no longer blame circumstances, people. Choice removes excuses. That is why many avoid it. But responsibility is not a burden, it is power. When you accept responsibility, you reclaim authority over your future. Life respects those who take ownership of their path. Victimhood repels opportunity, responsibility attracts it. Your choices speak louder than your environment. Many blame where they come from, but destiny is not born from location. It is born from decision. One right choice can interrupt generations of limitation. One obedient yes can rewrite a family story. Heaven does not respond to background, it responds to boldness. When you choose faith in the face of fear, life meets you with strength you did not know you had. Every season is waiting on a choice. Closed doors are often not rejection but hesitation. God does not force destiny on anyone, he offers it and waits. When you choose alignment, doors open. When you choose discipline, growth accelerates. When you choose obedience, provision follows. Life mirrors your commitment. It gives back what you are willing to give first. When you choose, you declare readiness. You announce to heaven, earth, and hell that you are no longer waiting to be rescued. You are ready to be responsible. And in that moment, life chooses you back. Opportunities appear. Strength rises. Clarity replaces confusion. Not because life became easier, but because you became decisive. Choice is the language life understands. God's silence is often a test of obedience. God's silence is one of the most misunderstood experiences in a believer's life. Many assume that when God is quiet, he is absent, displeased, or no longer involved. In reality, silence is often a deliberate strategy of heaven. God does not go silent because he has nothing to say. He goes silent to see if you will obey what he has already said. Obedience is proven not when God is speaking loudly, but when his voice seems distant and his instructions remain unchanged. Silence strips away emotional dependence and exposes spiritual maturity. When God speaks clearly, obedience feels easier because direction is fresh and reassurance is strong. But when God becomes quiet, the heart is revealed. Do you obey because you heard him once? Or do you need constant confirmation to stay faithful? Silence tests whether you trust God's word or your feelings. Faith that only functions with constant affirmation is fragile. Obedience that endures silence is powerful. God's silence also protects the process. Some instructions are meant to be followed, not discussed. If God kept speaking, explaining, or defending his plan, obedience would turn into negotiation. Silence shuts down argument and forces surrender. Abraham did not receive daily explanations on his journey. He received a command and then silence. That silence shaped his faith more than words ever could. Obedience matures in the absence of explanation. Silence confronts impatience. We live in a generation that demands instant clarity, quick answers, and immediate results. God's silence disrupts that mindset. It teaches waiting without quitting and trusting without control. Obedience during silence means continuing to walk, pray, serve, and believe even when nothing seems to be happening. This is where many abandon their assignment, not because God said no, but because he said nothing. God's silence also separates obedience from self-interest. When God is quiet, there is no emotional reward, no visible affirmation, and no public validation. What remains is pure obedience. Will you still do what is right when no one applauds and heaven appears silent? This is the level of obedience that qualifies people for greater responsibility. God entrusts more to those who remain faithful without constant feedback. In silence, God observes alignment. He watches how you respond under pressure, delay, and uncertainty. Do you compromise to fill the quiet? Do you panic and move ahead of him? Or do you stay positioned, obedient, and patient? Silence reveals whether you are led by the Spirit or driven by anxiety. Obedience in silence proves that God's authority matters more to you than immediate outcomes. God's silence is not abandonment, it is examination. It is the pause before promotion, the stillness before expansion. Those who pass the test of silence emerge with deeper authority, sharper discernment, and unshakable faith. Obedience refined in silence produces strength that noise never could. Complaining is rebellion in disguise. Complaining rarely announces itself as rebellion. It often sounds reasonable, emotional, even justified. Yet in the spiritual realm, complaining is not harmless expression. It is resistance against God's authority. Every complaint carries an accusation, and every accusation implies that God's leadership is flawed. When a believer complains, they are not just reacting to circumstances, they are challenging the wisdom of the one who allowed the season to exist. Complaining shifts focus from God's sovereignty to human discomfort. Instead of asking what God is forming, complaining asks why God is failing to deliver comfort. This posture turns trust into suspicion. The Israelites did not reject God openly, they complained. and through that complaining, they questioned his presence, his provision, and his promises. What appeared to be emotional venting became spiritual defiance. Complaining is rebellion that wears the mask of honesty. God hears complaining differently than prayer. Prayer seeks alignment, complaining demands alteration. Prayer submits, complaining resists. When someone complains, they are declaring that their perspective is superior to God's plan. This is why complaining delays progress. God will not advance a heart that refuses to trust Him. He may still provide out of mercy, but promotion is withheld where rebellion is entertained. Complaining also contaminates others. One voice of discontent can poison an entire community. In Scripture, murmuring spread like infection, turning faith into fear and unity into division. Complaining never stays private, it multiplies. That is why God deals with it so seriously. What seems like emotional release becomes spiritual sabotage. Complaining weakens collective faith and invites confusion into places where clarity once lived. There is also a hidden pride in complaining. It assumes entitlement. It suggests that God owes ease, speed, or explanation. True humility waits, trusts, and obeys even when outcomes are unclear. Complaining refuses to wait. It demands answers on human terms. That demand itself is rebellion, an unwillingness to accept that God's ways are higher and His timing is perfect. Complaining reveals where trust has broken down. You cannot complain about someone you fully trust. Complaints arise when faith is replaced by fear and gratitude by expectation. Instead of remembering what God has already done, the complainer fixates on what has not yet happened. This selective memory fuels rebellion because it disconnects the present struggle from past faithfulness. God does not silence complaining because He is harsh. He confronts it because it is destructive. Complaining hardens the heart, blinds discernment, and delays destiny. It keeps people circling wilderness experiences instead of entering promised places. What feels like emotional honesty becomes spiritual stagnation. When complaining stops, clarity returns. Gratitude restores alignment. Trust replaces resistance. A silent, submitted heart moves faster in God than a loud, dissatisfied one. Complaining may feel natural, but obedience is supernatural, and only obedience leads forward. What you keep saying, you keep seeing words are not empty sounds, they are carriers of direction. What you consistently speak begins to shape what you consistently experience. Life has a way of aligning itself with repeated speech, not because words are magical, but because they reveal agreement. When you keep saying something, you are coming into alignment with it. Over time, that alignment turns into manifestation. This is why many people live inside the boundaries of their own vocabulary. Speech trains perception. What you say repeatedly becomes what you notice. If your words are filled with fear, you will begin to see threats everywhere. If your language is filled with lack, scarcity will appear familiar and constant. The mind follows the mouth. Long before circumstances change, vision changes. And once vision changes, behavior follows. This is how words quietly build realities. God created the world through speech. He did not think creation into existence. He spoke it. Humanity was made in His image, which means speech still carries creative authority. When your words agree with God's truth, you cooperate with His design. When your words contradict His promises, you resist them. Many are asking God to change situations while verbally reinforcing the very outcomes they fear. Heaven responds to alignment, not contradiction. Repetition gives words power. A single statement spoken in emotion may pass, but repeated declarations settle into belief. Over time, those beliefs determine decisions. Decisions determine patterns, and patterns shape outcomes. This is why people keep seeing the same cycles. They speak the same frustrations, make the same choices, and wonder why nothing changes. What you keep saying, you keep seeing. Words also instruct the heart. The heart listens closely to the mouth. When you speak defeat, the heart prepares for loss. When you speak hope, the heart strengthens for endurance. Faith is not sustained by silence, it is sustained by confession. Even when circumstances disagree, the words you choose determine which voice has authority over your inner life. Negative speech does not just describe reality, it trains it. When you constantly speak about limitations, you begin to act in agreement with them. Opportunities may appear, but you will not recognize them because your language has conditioned you to expect failure. In contrast, disciplined speech sharpens expectation. It keeps the eyes open for movement, growth, and possibility even in difficult seasons. God often changes outcomes by changing mouths. Before he changes situations, he corrects speech. He knows that a transformed environment is useless if the language that created the problem remains unchanged. New levels require new language. If your words stay the same, your life will too. What you keep saying is what you keep agreeing with, and what you agree with eventually gains permission to stay. When speech changes, vision changes. When vision changes, direction changes. And when direction changes, life follows. The enemy waits for your confession. The enemy does not create authority. He looks for permission. He cannot move freely in a life that is aligned with truth, but he watches patiently for an opening. That opening is often not a mistake, a weakness, or it is a confession. Words spoken repeatedly become agreements. An agreement is what grants access. The enemy listens more closely to what you say than to what you fear, because spoken words reveal what you authorize. Confession is not merely religious language, it is legal language in the spiritual realm. What you confess is what you consent to. When fear is spoken, fear is empowered. When defeat is declared, defeat is legitimized. The enemy cannot override God's promises, but he can exploit human agreement against them. He waits until you say what contradicts what God said, because contradiction creates a breach. The enemy understands spiritual order. He knows he cannot cross certain lines unless invited. This is why temptation often begins with suggestion, not force. He plants a thought, but waits for you to speak it. Once the thought becomes a confession, it becomes a position. And once it becomes a position, it influences behavior. The enemy builds strongholds through repeated agreement, not sudden attacks. Many people believe the enemy attacks without cause, but Scripture shows he responds to access. Complaints, negative declarations, and constant self-defeating speech signal vulnerability. When you repeatedly confess weakness, lack, or failure, you are not being honest. You are being permissive. The enemy does not need truth, he needs consent. And consent is given through words. Confession also shapes identity. When someone constantly says, "I will never change," or "this always happens to me," they are forming a narrative the enemy is eager to enforce. He thrives on fixed mindsets that resist transformation. The enemy waits for confessions that limit God, because those limits create ceilings the enemy can operate under. Silence, in contrast, frustrates the enemy. When fear is not verbalized, it loses momentum. When doubt is not confessed, it remains powerless. This is why spiritual discipline over speech is essential. The enemy cannot war effectively against what is not articulated. He cannot amplify what is not spoken. The enemy also understands timing. He waits for moments of exhaustion, disappointment, or delay, knowing that careless words are more likely then. He does not rush. He waits for frustration to turn into confession. This patience makes him dangerous, but awareness makes him powerless. God calls his people to confession of truth, not confession of circumstance. Faith speaks what aligns with God, even when evidence disagrees. The enemy waits for the opposite. He waits for agreement with fear, limitation, and defeat. Guarded speech is not denial, it is warfare. What you refuse to confess, you refuse to empower. Jesus won battles by knowing when to be silent. Jesus understood that not every battle is won with words. In a world that values explanation, defense, and self-justification, he demonstrated a higher wisdom, strategic silence. His silence was not weakness, it was authority under control. He knew that unnecessary speech can dilute power, and that restraint often carries more weight than reaction. By choosing silence at critical moments, Jesus revealed mastery over both circumstance and self. Before Pilate, Jesus remained silent while false accusations were hurled at him. He did not correct every lie or defend his reputation. He understood that truth does not require constant defense. Silence in that moment protected the mission. If he had argued, explained, or retaliated, he would have shifted focus from purpose to self-preservation. Silence allowed prophecy to unfold without interference. Jesus also practiced silence in moments of provocation. When mocked, beaten, and misunderstood, he resisted the urge to respond emotionally. He knew that emotional reactions give power to the attacker. Silence deprived his enemies of control. It communicated confidence in God's justice rather than dependence on human validation. Silence in his hands became a weapon that exposed the emptiness of accusation. In the Garden of Gethsemane, Jesus chose silence toward the will of God. He prayed, but once the decision was made, he did not argue. Silence followed surrender. This teaches that silence is often the fruit of trust. When the heart is settled, the mouth rests. Jesus trusted the Father enough to stop explaining, stop resisting, and stop negotiating. Jesus also knew when speaking would sabotage timing. Not every truth is meant to be spoken immediately. He often withdrew from crowds, refused to answer certain questions, and delayed explanations. This restraint preserved focus. Speaking too soon can release information before the heart is ready to steward it. Silence guards destiny. Silence also separated Jesus from noise. The opinions of crowds, the pressure of religious leaders, and the expectations of disciples could not move him. He did not allow external voices to dictate internal direction. Silence created space for divine clarity. In that stillness, obedience remained pure. By remaining silent, Jesus forced others to reveal their hearts. Accusers exposed themselves through excess words, while his silence highlighted their insecurity. Silence has a way of allowing truth to surface without effort. Jesus let silence do the work that arguments never could. Jesus' silence teaches that strength is not proven by volume. Control is greater than reaction. Wisdom is knowing when words add value and when they dilute power. Silence, when guided by obedience, becomes victory. Silence is sometimes the highest level of faith. Faith is often associated with speaking, declaring, confessing, proclaiming. Yet there are moments when silence reveals a deeper, more mature faith than words ever could. Silence is not the absence of belief, it is the presence of trust. When a person remains silent in the face of pressure, accusation, delay, or uncertainty, they demonstrate confidence in God's sovereignty rather than dependence on their own explanation. Silence shows that faith has moved beyond anxiety. Words are often used to regain control, to explain, to defend, or to reassure oneself. Silence, however, indicates rest. It declares that the heart is settled even when circumstances are unsettled. This level of faith does not need to announce itself. It does not require validation or immediate results. It waits, knowing that God's timing is as important as His promise. Silence also reveals surrender. When faith is young, it argues with God. It questions timing and seeks clarity. Mature faith listens and yields. Silence after prayer is not resignation, it is agreement. It says, I trust you enough to stop talking. This is a dangerous kind of faith to the enemy because it removes fear's favorite fuel, verbal agreement. Silence protects what faith is carrying. Promises spoken too widely can be weakened by doubt, misunderstanding, or opposition. Silence acts as a shield. It allows faith to grow without interference. Many divine instructions are followed in quiet, not announced publicly. God often entrusts deeper revelations to those who can carry them without noise. Silence also proves obedience without reward. When there is no visible progress, no affirmation, and no explanation, silence becomes an act of worship. It honors God without condition. This kind of faith does not perform for applause. It remains faithful in obscurity. God values this posture because it reflects trust in His character, not just His power. In silence, faith listens more than it speaks. Listening requires humility. It acknowledges that God knows more than we do. Silence creates space for discernment, correction, and instruction. Faith that listens grows sharper. Faith that speaks constantly often misses direction. Silence confronts fear. Fear wants to talk, complain, justify, and predict worst-case outcomes. Faith silences fear by refusing to give it a voice. When fear is not spoken, it loses authority. Silence, in this sense, is not passivity, it is resistance. God often moves most powerfully in quiet obedience. Miracles are birthed in stillness long before they appear in public. Silence aligns the heart with heaven's rhythm. It reflects a faith that does not panic, does not rush, and does not demand proof. Silence, when chosen in trust, becomes the loudest declaration of belief.